I'm Greeny. Mike Woodson is back, and the Dans are here talking football, Orlovsky and Graziano, and that is where we wanted to start this morning, talking about all the wheeling and dealing, as it felt like half the NFL changed teams yesterday. But there was an incident last night in Utah that requires a great deal of conversation. Let's get right to it. Russell Westbrook and the Thunder in Utah taking on the Jazz. And first, let's go backwards in time. 11 months ago in a playoff game, Thunder in Utah, Russell Westbrook walking off at halftime, getting into it with a fan as he walks to the tunnel. Again, this is halftime, pointing at the fan to security. This is last April. Same game, walking off into the tunnel, smacking a phone out of the hands of a different fan. Westbrook clearly not happy, so he's had issues in Utah before. Now back to last night in the second quarter of their game, Westbrook getting into it with a fan. It was captured on tape. Here was the moment.
I promise you, stop playing. I swear to God. I swear to God. You up. You and your wife. You up. I promise you, everything I love. Everything I love.
That was the moment again in the second quarter. The Thunder would go on to win the game. That is certainly not the important part of this. Here was Russell Westbrook after it was over.
How it started was a young man and his wife in the stands told me to get down on my knees like he used to. And for me, that's just completely disrespectful to me. I think it's racial. I think it's just inappropriate in the sense of there's no protection for the players. I think there are a lot of great fans around the world that like to come to the game and enjoy the game. And there are people that come to the game and to say mean, disrespectful things about me, my family. For many years, man, I've done all the right things. I've never done anything to hurt or harm anybody. I've never been in any trouble. Never fought a fan. Been in the league 11 years. Clean slate. Disrespect will not be taken from me. I'm completely just sit back sometime and just take it like that. That's just one video, but throughout the whole game, since I've been here, especially here in Utah, every time I come here, it's a lot of disrespectful things I said. And for me, I'm just not going to continue to take disrespect from my family. There's got to be something done. There's got to be some consequences for those type of people that come to the game just to say and do whatever they want to say. And I don't think it's fair to the players, not just to me, but I don't think it's fair to the players. And if I had to do it over again, I would say the same exact thing.
Westbrook's teammate Patrick Patterson tweeted this: fans can say stuff about a man's family, wife, and kids. Tell a player, get down on your knees like you're used to. As men, what do you expect us to do? Shut up and dribble? No one is held accountable for their actions except for us. Fans are protected in every way possible, but not us. The fan in question was interviewed after the game and offered this account of the events.
He's got to be a professional. I mean, she was sitting down the entire time. Me and him were just, we were kind of having fun, to be honest.
At least you thought you were having fun?
Yeah, he was smiling at one point, and there was a lot of people, because it was when, Joe had come by and poked Paul George in the eye, and then Joe goes over and apologizes immediately. Russ is just F-bombing and carrying on, acting a fool down here, and everybody's getting on him. And he had, I guess, heat. I thought it was ice. I just told him, I'm like, just sit down and ice your knees, bro. And he turned to me and he's like, that's heat. And I'm like, well, you're going to need it. And then it turned into not safe for work.
That's his version of the event. The Jazz released this statement: we are continuing to investigate the unfortunate exchange at tonight's game between Russell Westbrook and fans. Multiple warning cards were issued by arena security. Players and fans have a shared responsibility to create a safe and respectful environment. If it is determined that any fans violated the NBA code of conduct, appropriate action will be taken. So that's what happened. Let's talk about what it means. Again, Jalen and Mike Woodson are here. Jalen, we see it. We have seen incidents of this sort. When I woke up this morning, the name Ron Artest was trending on Twitter because the biggest fear always is to go back to things like what happened with the Malice at the Palace. And so what is your reaction to what we saw last night?
Well, there's a lot there. So from Russell Westbrook's side, you got to think about it. He's at work, okay? It's emotional, high intensity. He's performing, trying to help his team win a basketball game. Now, fans are going to be there to cheer for their team, and rightfully so. I think the NBA fan interaction with his players is the best that we have in professional sports. But there are always going to be those people in the arena that take it too far, that feel like they are a part of the action and that they can say things to Russell Westbrook while he's in a shorts and a tank top that they wouldn't necessarily say to him when he's walking down the street like a normal civilian. And so how you remedy this is in the arena, security has to be more diligent. I don't think there should be sweeping changes to how we do things in the NBA. But you heard that there were some red cards issued as warnings. I think instead of issuing those warning cards, I think action has to initially take place, and then things like this don't escalate.
Mike, you were telling me a story that when you were coaching in Atlanta, you had an incident of this sort, and tell us how you handled it.
Well, you know, it happened right before the halftime, and I calmly walked over to security and asked them to remove him. And you know, I think that's the best way to handle it. You just can't cross the line with the fans. You know, fans pay their money, they come out, they want to see a ball game, and I try to stay away from it, and I think Westbrook should have done the same thing.
I understand that. There is, however, a line that no one should be expected to just take. Again, regardless of, I'm not talking about the specifics of this circumstance as much as I am in general. And so the point that you made to us this morning in the meeting is, get security involved. Walk over to a security guard rather than yelling and screaming yourself. Walk over, find a security guard, and have someone taken out of the arena.
Well, they all over the arena, so, you know, they put there for a reason. So you got to utilize them.
And that brings us, Jalen, to a different place, because now you're getting into an area where people are getting taken out of the arena, and now it's at the discretion of security. We just saw an incident of that sort over the weekend of an entirely different kind that sort of makes this look a little bit different.
Absolutely, with James Dolan. As he was leaving the game, a fan yelled at him to sell the team. And as an owner, we didn't necessarily cover this like it's going to be covered with Russell Westbrook. But in theory, it's the exact same thing happening in reverse. So for fans, again, you get a chance to be creative. Like, I always appreciated smart fans. Like earlier in the year when we were talking about when the Lakers went to Indiana and somebody was on the line and said, LeBron's going to trade you. Like, those type of things are fun, but also they're not necessarily name calling and it's not personal. When it becomes personal, a reaction is always going to happen.
I have seen, again, you guys lived it. Yes. I just covered it. But I have seen and heard things said to NBA players in arenas that is the blessing and the curse of having the fans essentially 2 feet away that I cannot believe. And I agree with you. I believe that there has to be a more proactive rather than reactive way of doing this from a security standpoint. You know what's going on down there. The fans sitting around people know what's going on down there. And before it gets to the level where Russell Westbrook is now captured on video yelling things that he has to explain, that situation can be handled ahead of time.
And also, sometimes fans think they're a part of the game. Like when somebody's on the free throw line and the crowd is cheering and the guy makes or miss, the fans actually think that they had an influence on that.
Right.
And so a lot of times they think they're a part of the outcome. And so for Russell and for this fan, who, by the way, seemed to have something personal against Russell. You can go online and there are some tweets that appear, they're not necessarily confirmed yet,
right,
that this fan already had an issue with Russell Westbrook anyway. So now he just took it to the arena and he got a chance to voice that opinion.
We will have much more to be said about this as our program continues today. In the meantime, let's leave it there for the moment and let's turn our attention to all the action around the National Football League yesterday and run the hurry up with the Dans, Graziano and Orlovsky. Dan Graziano, let's start with Tyrann Mathieu. Goes to Kansas City, 3 years, $42 million. How did this deal get done?
Well, monster deal for Mathieu. Kansas City needs help at the position. I think this could be bad news for Eric Berry, who has $7 million in guaranteed money coming on Saturday and could end up being cut because they haven't been able to count on him to stay healthy, which is why they end up signing Tyrann Mathieu.
Which brings us to another safety yesterday who got a huge deal, and that's Landon Collins to Washington. 6 years, $84 million. Dan Graziano, did that total surprise you?
It does. It's a huge deal. It's bigger than the Berry deal by about $1 million a year, so it's symbolic. Break it down. What he's probably going to end up getting is about 3 years, $45 million, which is still a monster deal. Makes him right now, at the moment, the highest paid safety in the league.
Out to Oakland, where they've been very busy. We know they brought in Antonio Brown over the weekend. Now they signed Trent Brown, the Patriot offensive tackle. 4 years, $66 million. A monster deal for the offensive tackle.
Yeah, what I like about this deal is he's going to get $15.25 million this year, but $21.5 million next year after the team moves to Vegas. There is no state income tax in Nevada. There's huge state income tax in California. I wonder wonder if we'll see Antonio Brown and other Raider deals structured in a way that the player can take advantage of that.
Meanwhile, we may have to rename the team in Detroit the Patriots because that's where almost every former Patriot goes. Trey Flowers joining the procession going to play for Matt Patricia. What do you make of all these former Pats now in Detroit?
Yeah, particularly with Flowers, there was the thought that this would make sense for Patricia because having coached him, he knows his particular value. This guy is a guy that can play all over the defensive line, doesn't have big sack totals, but Patricia's a guy that knows what he brings. And Flowers is a guy that knows what Patricia wants to do and can help communicate it to the rest of the defense.
And finally, as we had known basically was coming since last week, Nick Foles to Jacksonville, 4 years, $88 million, $50 million guaranteed. He basically is now being paid like a top-level NFL quarterback.
Yeah, like a mid to high-level starting quarterback, which is a big deal. It's more than I thought he'd get. But I think the pitch to the Jaguars from the agents, who, by the way, had a huge day yesterday with Anthony Barr and Landon Collins and all these guys, that was like, look, don't lowball your starting quarterback. He's got to go in there and be a starting quarterback. If everybody knows he's not getting paid any money, that could kind of weaken his stature in the locker room, or at least maybe even his confidence.
There was a feeling around that the Jaguars were bidding against themselves on this yesterday. Is that accurate?
I believe they were. I do not think Miami was in this. That was the only other place where you could really see a starting job open. It seems like the Jaguars were the only game in town for Foles. Foles was the only game in town for the Jaguars in terms of a guy with high-level starting experience, Super Bowl MVP. It got done, but at a higher level than I expected.
Okay, so that's what happened. Now let's talk about what it meant. Dan Orlovsky is back with us. You've been gone too long, big fella. It's good to see you.
Finally got the invite.
Okay, of all of the moves from yesterday, which do you believe was the most impactful?
I look at Honey Badger to Kansas City. And, Kansas City's been very outspoken. Brett Veach and Andy Reid have said, we cannot mess this situation up that we have with Patrick Mahomes being such a young talent. And so fix that defense. Honey Badger, one of the best guys on the back end getting picks. He's a fantastic blitzer, great in run support. So you're looking at a guy that can be incredibly versatile for this defense. And now you've filled not only a need, but like the main issue last year with Kansas City's defense was they didn't really have a playmaker on the back end that they could rely on. And so you've got this explosive offense. Now you've went and got Honey Badger, like I've talked about, one of the best playmaking defenders in all the NFL.
That's sort of the new way. Kansas City is not going to play defense by trying to hold you to 3 points, but they need to make a play here or there, make a pick, make a sack, have a moment that gives your offense a chance to win the game.
Think about all those third down conversions by the Patriots in the last few drives in that AFC Championship game. Just stop one of them, and you're in the Super Bowl. That's what they're thinking. They went after Landon Collins, didn't get him. Tyrann Mathieu, obviously, I don't know if he's a fallback. He's a great player, but the same kind of guy in terms of being able to play all over the field, do different things.
And to your point, I mean, they're going to play him inside. They'll play him outside. They'll play him at safety. They'll blitz him. They'll put him on the line of scrimmage. I mean, Spagnuolo is going to have plenty of packages that they can put the Honey Badger in. It's a huge signing because, again, now they've kind of given that defense some solidity.
Let me run through this a little. What team do you think to this point is winning free agency?
Your team, the Jets. The Jets, they had to. First of all, they had too much money to lose it. But, when you look at the signing of Anthony Barr, who I played against with the Minnesota Vikings, very impactful player. Obviously, this morning, C.J. Mosley. They went and got Jamison Crowder, who I love. And so when we're talking about a young quarterback, Sam Darnold, now I've given him a receiver that can make plays. C.J. Mosley, one of the better on-the-ball, off-the-ball linebackers. Again, an example of a guy who can do so many different things. Anthony Barr, I believe that they'll rush him a little bit more. They'll blitz him a little bit more and allow him to go after the quarterback. But the Jets had money. I said it on this show many times that not necessarily the coach was an important hire. What did they do with their money? And so now you're looking at a defense that's got a lot of players to help that young quarterback come along.
And it's not just the head coach who will be an offensive-minded guy, but they bring in Greg Williams, who is crafty, and they've got a bunch of linebackers. I'm reading, obviously, a lot about this, the reaction on social media. The Jets have a lot of linebackers.
They do. Everyone's shocked that they were able to get both of these big linebackers. Obviously, they paid through the nose to do it. I mean, average of $17 million a year for C.J. Mosley blows away the Luke Kuechly deal from 2-3 years ago for the linebacker market. But look, they're not done. They still need a center. They're in on Matt Paradise from the Broncos. I don't think they're all the way out on Le'Veon Bell yet, and that's a guy that could really help, obviously, spark the offense. But the Jets, the GM's spending cap space like his job depends on it.
Which it should. Okay, then let me get you all the way back now to Nick Foles, because This is a Jacksonville team that had the lead in the AFC Championship game a year and a half ago. Now they add the credible quarterback in Nick Foles. Do you believe they are now a playoff/Super Bowl contender?
No, this team still has a lot of issues. It's a bad offensive line. They've got an unreliable running back. They've got one receiver on their team that has 100 catches in his NFL career. So we can't expect the Nick Foles that we saw in Philadelphia. There is no Alshon Jeffrey. There is no best offensive line or one of the best offensive lines in all of football. There is no Zach Ertz. So I'm glad for Nick Foles, good for him, but don't expect the same player. Are they better than Houston? No. Are they better than Indy? No. Are they better than the Browns? No. Are they better than New England? No. Are they better than Tennessee? Are they better than I mean, there's still teams that they're not better.
If the answer is no on Tennessee, then they're the fourth best team in a four-team division, and there isn't room for them in the playoffs.
There's still a lot of holes on that football team that need to be filled. It's not just the quarterback.
All right, one other thing I want to get to here, and that is because, of course, we spent so much time talking about Antonio Brown, and he winds up in Oakland, arguably the best receiver in the sport. Where he would wind up, now we know where he is. He's the highest paid player in the league at his position. And the new question is, how will he get along with Jon Gruden, who has notoriously had some headbutting issues with high-profile wide receivers, most famously with our very own Keyshawn Johnson, who offered these thoughts yesterday.
Only thing I can say is keep your head on the swivel, because when it starts to go in a different direction, that honeymoon period will be over with, and you'll have to either suck it up or you'll find yourself moving on to another team, because Jon Gruden is going to be there for a couple of years, more at least. When you are given a certain amount of money as a player, you expect to be utilized in a certain way. And when they go away from game planning to Antonio Brown, or when he's not getting the touches that he thought he was going to get, because Jon Gruden certainly will be telling him he's going to be featured, when it doesn't work out that way, how will you be able to explain that to your star player? That certainly becomes an emotional stress process for a player of his magnitude.
Now, you may recall Keyshawn and Gruden won a Super Bowl together in Tampa, but then it got so bad that Gruden sent him home in the middle of the season. So you know from whence he comes. Brown is a tremendously talented player. What did you think of this combination, and what did you make of what Keyshawn said?
Well, Keyshawn's first-hand account, so there's certainly some weight to that, right? When you have that experience, I give the Raiders credit. You know, I've been outspoken saying you have to go get Derek Carr some players, and so they certainly, as everyone has talked about, they fleeced the Steelers on the move. I've said that if you're going to go get AB, your quarterback better be incredibly comfortable in his skin, and there's been some question marks with Derek Carr. So is Antonio Brown the talent that everyone knows he is? Absolutely. So now you've got Jordy Nelson, who played pretty good year at the end of the year last year for the Raiders, and now one of the most dynamic weapons, offensive talents in the NFL, surely. But it's not going to be so much about on the field for me with Antonio Brown. It's going to be the marriage off the field.
And Dan, I saw your notes going over the contract, the particulars of Carr's contract. He sort of has a 1 year show it to me or they can move on kind of circumstance here, right?
Yeah, $19.9 million this year, all guaranteed, but nothing guaranteed after that. So if he plays poorly and they want to change quarterbacks going to Vegas, they can. But to Dan's point, you know, Antonio Brown's going to get the ball a ton in this offense, and he should. He's the top option by far. But Gruden and Mayock and all these guys that are running the team are kind of playing the long game. We're going to get to Vegas, and we're going to be good there. We're going to build a contender in Vegas. They've got to be able to sell Antonio Brown on that long game and on the idea that maybe this first year there of him in Oakland may not be what he's used to in terms of playoff contender.
I hear you. They're spending a boatloads of money, and we'll see if they wind up getting in on Le'Veon Bell or not. There's a question about whether they have cash flow issues on that front and all that. I want to bore people with that part of the discussion. But what I'll say is, if you're playing the long game, does spending a fortune on a 31-year-old wide receiver make sense?
When it's that receiver, yes. I mean, when you've got their production and the work ethic. Remember, one of the things that is the calling card for AB is the work ethic. So certainly he's 31, but he's such a savage of a worker that his body is still young.
The only thing I will say with John is and I obviously I've known Jon Gruden now for years and years as he worked with us. His favorite quarterback is always the next one he can get.
Good luck.
So if I'm Derek Carr, I'd keep a very close eye on that. And with the things he has said about Kyler Murray, I would not rule out that possibility either. We are just getting started. Boy, we're jam-packed this morning. Coming up, Trainwreck was the name of an Amy Schumer movie. LeBron was in that. He's in it again. It sort of describes his season in Los Angeles. Jalen will tell us what the King can do to get this thing fixed.